Welcome to Goalie Science, the podcast that bridges the gap between goaltending, science, and peak performance. I'm your host, Jamie Phillips, a former professional goalie, currently pursuing a doctorate in physical therapy and specializing in goalie performance coaching. Joining me as always is Dr. Ben Cernick, a seasoned goalie coach and sports analytics specialist. Whether you find yourself at home, on the road, or at the rink, grab a cup of your favorite beverage and let's drop the puck on this week's episode.
Jamie, it's another episode. We're back together this week, but it's not just us. This week, we were lucky to be joined by Steve Thompson. We'll give you the full intro. He's from USA Hockey. He's the manager, the director, whatever you want to call it, but he is in charge of the goalies as part of USA Hockey. And Jamie, we've done over 80 episodes, and I have to say, this absolutely was one of my favorites.
Yeah. Is this episode 80 or 81?
No, 81.
Oh, nice. I'm going to be honest. I wasn't there for the Dr. Gray podcast, but so far this had to be probably my favorite episode. I learned a ton, and it made me a lot more optimistic in terms of North American hockey development and just the confidence in some of the people that are, in charge of these things. I mean, we're trying our best to spearhead things on like the private side and doing the podcast and our own coaching and social media and stuff. But then to talk to Steve and hear someone involved with USA Hockey who's talking to other nations and other goalie coaches and has boots on the ground, that was a great conversation. And I think if there is any podcast episode that, you as a goalie parent or as a goalie, you're ever going to recommend to coaches or other parents or anything like this, honestly, this is the episode to do it, because everyone, no matter who you are or what your role is in the game, from head coach to assistant coach to goalie coach to equipment manager, like there's something for everyone to learn. So I can't thank Steve enough for joining us on this episode.
Yeah, if you're a goalie, if you're a parent, if you're a coach, listen up, because this one's for you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Goalie Science Podcast. I'm your host, now officially Dr. Jamie Phillips, but excited to be here. And we have a guest today. We're with Steve Thompson, who is the director of goaltending for USA Hockey, or director of youth goaltending. How would you describe your title? There's a few things floating around the internet.
Yeah, well, it gets read in many different directions. My technical title is the manager of goaltending development, but it gets thrown every which direction. So I think somebody at the company called me the president of goaltending the other day, and I was like, that sounds like it should come with a pay raise. I don't know. But it's, as you guys would assume, there's not a lot of people pulling on the goalie rope. So we're a little bit understaffed, but we love what we do. So we're all trying to pull on the rope, and it ends up encompassing a lot of different things in the goaltending realm.
Good. Well, before we get into kind of your role with USA Hockey, I always like to dive into your background a little bit. You're a former goalie. So if you could, in the best sort of elevator pitch you can, briefly describe your goaltending career and how you ended up as the director of goaltending for USA Hockey.
Yeah, I got pretty lucky. My parents were from Ohio. They weren't hockey background at all. My dad got stationed in Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska, and he got free tickets to an Aces game, one of the local pro teams there, and we had no idea what hockey was. I knew some neighbor kids in the cul-de-sac that played some street hockey, and they were older, so I kind of wanted to be cool like the older kids and play with them. So we ended up going to the game, and Ryan Renfrew, who's now with the Winnipeg Jets, was the goalie on the team, and he had the coolest pad set up. He had the painted mask. It was a 2-0 game. He was first star of the night, and I had no idea what I was watching, but I knew I wanted to be the guy in the net. And it was just really motivated at that point on to be goalie. Spent a lot of time playing street hockey with the older kids in the cul-de-sac being the goalie. Ran into Dominic Hasek on ESPN2, and that led me to pillowcases on my legs and my brothers throwing paper, toilet paper balls at me in the hallway. And it was just a passion from day one. I was just obsessed with being the goalie. And that led me to, playing up until college, and had a great experience in my playing career, and shifted right into coaching from there, and just kind of said yes to every opportunity. Anybody that ever asked me for advice on how to climb the ranks in coaching, I always just encourage them to say yes when opportunities arise. Doesn't matter if it's convenient, doesn't matter if it's a good location, a good team, etc., the good pay grade. Just say yes. Be around as many people as you can, build that network, And then hopefully if you do your job well, you'll convince everybody that you know what you're doing along the way, and it'll open up more doors. And that's kind of what led me to where I'm at with USA Hockey.
Now, you jumped right into coaching after your collegiate career. Was that part of your goal, was to get into this kind of role where you were with a large group overseeing, the nation of goalies? Or did your initial plan be like, hey, I'm going to go goalie coaching into college, pro? How did you kind of structure that? Or at the time graduation, what was your kind of career path that you were trying to walk down?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was that calculated. Honestly, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had not played a ton in college. My last couple years, I maybe played like 5 or 6 games over the season. So I didn't have a great playing pedigree to really play professional hockey in North America. And the 2 options I had were either to play in France or to get involved in coaching. And Matt Thomas, who's now at the Providence Bruins, was the head coach at UAA at the time. They were looking for a goalie coach. And he said, listen, if you're just trying to go to Europe to have some fun, just save some money up, get into coaching now, and then you can go to France and you can get that European experience you're looking for. And I still kind of kick back and forth because I felt like I had more to give, and I'm sure everybody that plays has that feeling where they're not really sure yet. But I'm so grateful I listened to his advice, because it got me a leg up with a lot of my peers who did end up playing 5-10 years of pro afterward and then got into coaching. I had already had 5 or 10 years of experience in coaching at that point, and so I'm really grateful that I made that decision. And, like I kind of said earlier, I just kind of said yes to any opportunity. And UAA being a smaller school with not a huge staff, I originally was director of hockey operations because that was my foot in the door to get paid and not be a volunteer. That kind of taught me how to manage the logistics of a team and the budget of a team, and kind of a lot of business org that I never thought I was going to learn or need to know. From there, I got my strength conditioning certifications because the school deemed I needed to be a strength conditioning coach if I was going to be on the ice. So I got my CSCS, ended up working with the volleyball team, the wrestling team, some other programs at the university, which again, I never thought I was going to be a strength coach. I never thought I needed to know those things, but it was required for me to be the goalie coach. And then USA Hockey opportunities started happening with the volunteer side. I would run some coaching education courses in Alaska for the local coaches. I would help evaluate goalies at the state level and the Pacific District level. And then thankfully, I got pretty lucky that Kevin Ryder was with the NTDP as the goalie coach at the time, and he was an alum of UAA. So I think he had a soft spot for me because I was from his former school, and he wanted to see me have success with that connection. So he offered me some opportunities to go to our national camps probably earlier than I would have had opportunity to do so if there wasn't that tie with UAA. And that just kind of got me in front of a lot of USA Hockey people. And I'd say, realistically, the biggest thing that happened is after my 2 years at UAA, I ended up working for Mike Buckley, who was then with the Pittsburgh Penguins at the time. And Phil O'Sara was the first ever goalie manager at USA Hockey. And when he first took over the position, he just kind of went around the entire country meeting with different goalie coaches, trying to figure out what should we make American goaltending? What should the brand be? Who's doing great things across the country that we can borrow and use? And he really liked Mike's stuff. And that was what he wanted to use. So if you are familiar with our ABCs of depth, that was Mike Buckley's. If our 6 fundamentals that we teach in all of our bronze courses, that was Mike Buckley's. Unfortunately for me, Mike was really busy at the NHL level and couldn't meet with Phil all the time. So I kind of became Mike's second-hand man that would have the time to give to Phil to share all this knowledge that Mike had. And that relationship between Phil and I, and me being able to share all of Mike's tricks to the trade, I think really helped me, again, become that voice of reason for some of these things. And then I think I kind of fooled them that I knew what I was talking about and earned the opportunity for a position.
What does what's your day-to-day like? You have the title of manager of goaltending, director of goaltending, whatever you want to call it. But what does that mean for those listening at home?
Yeah, the beauty of this thing is it's kind of, you love goaltending. What do you want to do? And I love that about it. The challenge is there's a lot that we can obviously tackle. So we've broken the position into 3 different stages. We have the try stage, which is really growth oriented. How do we get more kids in gear? And then how do we make them love that experience, want to sleep in their goalie equipment and be a goalie the rest of their life? We have our develop stage, which is really about coaching education. How do we get more youth hockey coaches across the country that know enough about goaltending to support their players in practice and in games? And then there's the player development side. How do we make sure we're teaching kids what they need at the right ages? How do we make sure that we're providing the right content and for these kids to make it and make American goalies the best in the world. And then lastly, we have our master class, which I kind of just touched on a little bit. It's how do we have our country's best be the world's best? And that's where we try and bring in our country's best goalie coaches. We try and learn from other countries and figure out what is going to be that 1% that has more Americans in net than any other country in the world. That's kind of the theme for it. As far as what my days look like, it's all over the place. Sometimes it's adult goalie clinics. Sometimes it's, today I was mentioning before with you two, I just got off a Zoom call with Jim Craig. I did an interview with him for this National Goaltending Symposium that we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks. So got to pick Jim's mind on what led to his success in the Miracle on Ice, what things about goaltending he's taken into his professional career now that he's so grateful that he learned through the playing position, and build an apparel, kind of whatever you can think of, we're tackling, which is a lot of fun.
So you had mentioned that the final stage is that you said the masterclass stage.
Yeah.
So there's this belief out there, and Ben and I have talked about this. Basically, so Ben is Canadian. I'm originally Canadian. Now I'm an expat. I live in the States. But so a lot of our themes are Canada hockey oriented, and there's this belief in Canada for sure that Canadians are falling behind in goaltending. And the Europeans, specifically the Finns, the Russians, and the Swedes are just out developing us. From where you stand in your position, what are your thoughts around that? Are the European countries truly out developing us, or is that just the mindset because some of those top goalies in the NHL are, just very good? The Vasilevskis, the Shesterkins, the Sorokins, those kind of guys.
Did you just say Europe and then name 3 Russian goalies back to back?
Yeah, so Russia obviously being Asia, but most people don't know that though.
Welcome to goalie geography. James Phillips. Holy cow.
Yeah,
everyone. I'm gonna learn this kind of stuff. Otherwise, it becomes unhinged.
Exactly. Got to keep them in line, Ben. That's why you're here. No, I do. I think per capita, the numbers don't lie. They have higher percentages of playing numbers than our countries do per capita. I know at least Finland, Sweden, they have about the same playing population as Minnesota itself. Yet we don't have that many Minnesotans in the NHL. We have a lot, but playing wise, we don't have as many as they do per capita. So I do think they are doing a better job than we are. I don't think from my experience that it's at the higher ends. When I watch, and again, I'm not really privy to the high performance side as much. I did get the opportunity to travel around Sweden and go to some of their pro practices after the World Juniors this year, and nothing looked too dramatically different than what we see. It looked like goalie training. But where I really think the Europeans hit it out of the park is their youth development models. They do not allow their kids to be ranked at younger ages. There's no such thing as an U AAA team. There's no such thing as a 10U AAA team. Goalies aren't told in the European countries that you don't belong. But yet in North America, we're in such a rush to tell a 7-year-old you're not good enough and you need to be on the B team. You're not good enough. You can't play tier 1 hockey. And they quit playing because they believe it. No 7-year-old is going to play if they're told they're not good enough. And our country in Canada loves to tell kids that they don't belong in hockey. And we're not doing it intentionally. We all think we're doing it because we want to see competitive nature. We want the right kids to be playing with the right kids. It's for all the best intentions. But I don't think what we're looking at and seeing this as negatively as we should be. We should be as inclusive as we can be, and that's what those European countries do. They let everybody play. Everybody plays every game, and there's no such thing as ranking. So you and your small communities, everybody puts their sticks in and plays hockey. And then when they get to 12, 13, 14, that's when it becomes competitive. That's when it becomes exclusive. And their player base is so much larger because they haven't cut 20,000 kids along the way. And that's where I think we can take the next step. I think if we could do a better job in those youth spaces and not moving more kids away from the game, we would have a higher percentage of kids that are elite at the older ages. And until we get there, I think we're going to continue to see European numbers going up and North American numbers going down.
Yeah, I think this is something that we've talked actually a lot about in the past couple of years. Like, I'm fortunate enough to, again, like you, be able to work with people in this space who are looking at this sort of thing. And that is the consensus answer when you look at experts, right? It's we need to not deselect kids unnecessarily before they've even had a chance to figure out if they like the sport, right? And I think, and again, we've seen it a little bit in the US. We've talked about this on the show before in Ontario. we've seen a growth of these little mini leagues outside of Hockey Canada's jurisdiction. I know they're creeping into the US as well, where we have this like U6 AAA, U7 AAA. And again, it's great. You want kids to be involved in hockey. If they want to play 5 times a week, that's great. And that it's safe, go play 5. But it does start to create that funnel really, really, really early, right? And it's challenging, and especially for goalies. And again, we've seen this, and maybe this will be kind of the next question I want to take around this is we see in those European models, they scale the game better to the little guys too, right? So we got small ice hockey. Maybe it's a third of the rink. I know in Sweden, they even for the little guys, they use a sixth of the rink. And I think if you were to tell some parents in North America that your kid's going to play on a sixth of a rink, they would probably yell at you a little bit. Yeah, but that's it, right? Me again, Jamie and I obviously are both goalie coaches, but I know all the time with 6 and 7-year-olds in full size nets on full size ice, and it's like they're playing soccer out there. They're doing their best, and they're probably still having fun. But is it the best for development? I think you can start to argue it's not, right?
Yeah, it's a challenge. We had a 5 Nations event in Colorado Springs a couple of years ago, and one of the fun events we did during the tournament was we had all of the countries get together just to talk shop on what they're seeing in player development. And I asked the countries that were there were Switzerland, Czechia, Germany. I'm trying to think of whoever the last one was. There was one other country there, but more or less, I asked the countries, what are you all doing facing this goalie shortage that we're all under right now? And all the guys, none of them knew English that well, and they all kind of looked at each other, and they were like saying this, that, and that to each other, and then they go, yeah, we don't have a goalie shortage. We don't know how to answer that question. And I was like, how do you guys not have a goalie shortage? All I'm ever hearing about from my desk is how there's no goalies in the U.S. anymore. And then when I talk to my Canadian counterparts, they just say, wow, we have fewer and fewer goalies. We're running out of teams because we don't have enough goalies to fill teams. Yet in Europe, that's not happening. And again, I just wish that we could look to those countries and see it as a good opportunity to learn. I sometimes get pushback when we bring up Europe all the time. They just don't want to hear it. It's a tired story. They don't want to hear about what the Swedes and the Finns are doing, but yet we're not happy with what we're doing. So we can't talk both sides. We can't say we don't want to learn from what's going well, but we also don't want to hear about it because, we're proud Americans and we don't need to be using other people's information. Or, sometimes I'll hear, well, why isn't Canada doing it? If smaller nets are so important to youth development, why are kids in Canada not using smaller nets? And so that's some of the counterpart conversation that I'll have is, with the Hockey Canada goalie coaches, how can we please both be on the same page? Because I know if you guys start having smaller nets, then when I go to my states, they'll say, well, Canada's doing it, and vice versa. If we can collectively get this done, if we can be teammates and goalie partners for 364 days out of the year, and then that one match when we're playing against each other, compete, then I think that's going to be the best for goaltending at large.
When you're talking with organizations, other goalie coaches, parents that are not as involved, or they just want the best for their kids and their goalies, and for you kind of have to toe this line between taking the science or whatever the European countries are doing, the ones that are doing a lot more research, and then the application in terms of what it's like when you're actually on the ice, the boots on the ground. How do you articulate that to a parent in order to try to show or explain why smaller nets or smaller ice or different non USA or North American traditional things might be beneficial to the goaltending development or even hockey development as a whole?
Where I found the most success is when we introduce these topics or these nets or these playing surfaces and something that's not as competitive. When it's a real game, they feel like, well, we need the real life surface. We need the real nets. If it's like a jamboree or a goalie skate, then that can be an opportunity for us to introduce some of these things in an area where parents aren't as guarded and maybe kids aren't as guarded. I often find that kids are more just reflecting what they hear in the car ride home and not necessarily their true opinions. When I end up having opportunity to talk with the kids on the ice before they've been primed by their parents, usually the conversation is very different than the next day after they got to hear about it at the dinner table and then come back to the rink with a new thought on why smaller nets are going to ruin their life. And so what we've done is try to introduce these in different spaces. And then as crazy as this sounds, we have the most success in the areas of our country that don't know anything about hockey. If it's a non-traditional hockey market, These parents come from basketball and they remember shooting on smaller hoops. They come from soccer and you would never play in an adult-sized soccer net. If you look at the percentage that the net and the playing surfaces increase in different sports, hockey is so far behind. Every other sport's already doing this, and it makes total sense to those alums of those sports. But when you're in an area that only knows hockey and remembers how it was when they played, and they have a grandfather that made it to the NHL playing in big nets, so why on earth would we change the net size? That's where we have the most friction. And so sometimes it is. I was just in Wyoming a couple weeks ago. Wyoming's chomping at the bit to do anything they can to have fun and enjoy the game. They don't feel the same pressure that maybe in some of the more traditional hockey states do. And any idea is a good idea to them, which is why I love spending some time in those areas. But yet I'd enjoy the challenge of going into some of the other areas, because when you can get them to buy in, then you've really made positive change in the country, because those are the largest playing populations. That's going to be the biggest growth.
Dude, I've got just terrible news. The people are going to be angry at you in the comments for saying that we should learn from other sports. There's an ongoing battle where I just get yelled at for mentioning the word soccer any time in a. But it's like there's a lot to learn. If every other sport's doing it, if major countries that are successful in other sports have methods that they're using, like research and sport applications all about stealing, right? Everyone stole Russian Soviet training from the 1950s and 60s, right? And now everyone does what's been done there for a while, and that's fine, right? But you're right, it's stuff's valuable. We have emotional attachment to the way things have been done. Change is it's just really hard.
And I think that's a great point. People want to be a part of the change. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be empowered to make change themselves. And that is another area that we've had success. We've got a group in the southeast of our country that has piloted using intermediate nets at 10U hockey.
Nice.
They're so inspired because they know that if you're living in Arkansas, you can't just continue to do what Massachusetts and Minnesota are doing if you're going to leapfrog them. They have more players. They've been doing it for longer. It's going to be harder to make change. But if we do something dramatically different and get that upper edge, then maybe we can start producing more Division I and pro athletes. And they're inspired by that mission, and it's their mission. It's not our mission. It's their mission, and that's what's really motivated them to do it. Now, they still are getting a lot of pushback. There's still a lot of parents that are frustrated. As with anything, there's change, and the way to communicate change is we're learning along the way. But we've empowered areas of our country to be the next Norway, who has done unbelievable things with a small player population for all sports, summer sports included. When they become that motivated area of our country to become the best youth sport state in the country, and it's their own project, that's when they run with it. And that's when we get to borrow their great ideas, because they get to actually deploy it. Because that is one of the challenges with being the national governing body. We don't have the luxury of some of those other smaller European countries of just making a rule and saying, this is the way things will be done. You will play on small nets starting tomorrow, check. It's not the way we operate. We can recommend based on research, based on this is our day job. We spend our entire life studying the sport. Please try this. I promise it's a great idea, but we can't just slam the hammer down and say, do this. It's right for kids.
Yeah. I think again, the Norway point's great. And for people listening who might not know this, Norway has less than 400 registered goalies in the country. Like everyone who plays the position. You have more goalies in like a district in the US or Canada than the entire country of Norway has, who are just playing the position, let alone, junior caliber, college caliber, right? When a country like that is forced to do so much more with so much less, that's where you start seeing creativity, right? And I think that story of what's taking place in the Southeast is really incredible. And I think it's actually a really nice transition to another question, and something that you recently spoke about and have been a pretty vocal advocate for, which is kind of curious about what your thoughts are on how we look at traditional hockey practice, and kind of where you think steps would be taken to be improved. And for some background, people who listen to the show regularly have heard me go on and on about this. My master's thesis was about hockey practice design. It's what my research is focused on. And so I'm really curious to hear kind of your thoughts behind where you think things could be going, ways that we could take it, things that we're doing well, things that we're not doing so well.
Yeah. I think I speak out of both sides of my mouth on this one. Part of me really wants to advocate for goalies and say we need to make practice better for goalies. And there's another part of me that feels like We need to be hockey players that just happen to play goalie and not goalies that happen to play hockey. And sometimes we become so sensitive to goalie training in this really blocked space where I'm telling you I'm shooting at low glove and I'm telling you where the pass is going and everything's so scripted that it's almost become that is globally known as the only way for things to be a goalie drill. And if it's a team practice, you're just a shooter tutor and it's not beneficial for you at all. You may as well skip your team practice and go to your private lesson. And I really don't believe in that model. I think in order for us to really be successful, we have to make sure that practice is mutually beneficial. And it has to be tailored for every player on the ice, not just the goalies, not just the forwards. Too often it has been tailored towards forwards and defense. But I think if we try and totally shift the other direction, one, I don't think it's feasible because our numbers are so much lower. We're always going to lose the boat. But two, I don't think it's going to be beneficial for our goalies either. I think we really need to start seeing practice as hockey practice. And this has to be the space where our kids are learning how to make decisions. They're learning how to read. They're learning how to make reads off each other and not just the puck. There's so much more to this game than just getting hit with the puck and standing in the right spot. It's, as Jim Craig was saying earlier, running the table, not just putting the ball in the corner pocket. How can you as the goalie make plays in the crease that's going to determine what your defenders do next, what your offense does next, the entire team? And you can't do that in a 3x6 shoebox working on edge work or working on routine glove saves. That has to be done in team practice. And so I think if we really want to evolve to being an elite goaltender that understands the entire game of hockey, it's going to happen at team practice. And so we've really got to start to value that as a goaltending community. Now, yes, we need our practice to be better, and there's a lot of ways we can do that, but I don't like this notion that team practice isn't for me that I hear often.
If you could design free reign, design like your ideal practice in terms of you have a 15-minute slot, how would you set that up to make it both goalie focused as well as beneficial for forwards and defense in like a perfect world with you, no constraints?
Yeah, I think two things that we really focus on with practice design, one being 5 elements. We want to make sure that we have constant decision making throughout our practice. We want to make sure that it looks like the game. We want to make sure that it's challenging at the appropriate level. And not just because you're a 10U, but even in your internal team, certain players are better than others. They need to be challenged at different levels. So if you have an elite player, can you design that drill where maybe they are further away from the puck at the start of it? Or maybe they have 2 opponents instead of just one. You can get creative on ways to make sure you're meeting the needs of all your athletes on how they're being challenged. And we want to make sure that practice is fun. But really fun in our minds is that's a byproduct of doing the other 4 things really well. It's not let's play tag. It's not let's just play duck, duck, goose. Those things are fun for younger kids because they meet the needs. Duck, duck, goose is fun because there's decision making. It's challenging for those that don't know how to skate. There's the constant, it looks somewhat like the game. You're having to work on your edge work and sitting down and getting back up. It's age appropriate. That's what makes it fun for younger kids. You play duck, duck, goose with your pro team, they're going to have fun for like 5 minutes and be like, all right, we got a game on Friday. No more duck, duck, goose. Let's get to work. But I think if we start with those elements and then we build those into our practice design and make sure we hit on those, then we know we're going to have some real deep learning that takes place. The other thing we run into is how can we make sure that we have diversity of shot locations, quality timing between shots so our goaltenders have the opportunity to prepare for the shot, make the save, and then recover before worrying about another puck. And, again, every shot in the game is not in the house. There are goal line attacks. There are behind the net pass outs. There are shots from the point. There's traffic. Make sure we have these elements in our team practice. It cannot just turn into get to the hash marks and shoot from the house every single shot and then be frustrated in our goalie when they let in a shot from the half wall. That's only an easy save if you've worked on making that save often. But when your team practice design never has a shot from the half wall, that's not a very easy save to make. Post integration is really hard when you don't get reps at it. And so I think those are kind of the things that I would focus on when designing that practice. One thing I really want to do, but haven't had the chance to experiment with yet, is have a drill only have 1 puck. You're not allowed to have more than 1 puck on the ice. If your puck goes in, the play can't start until somebody gets the puck out of the net and passes it to that next player. If your drill is a progression where there's going to be a shot from a point and then a goal line attack afterward. That goal line attack can't start until that shot from the point is played out and then passed to the corner for that net drive to then start. I think so much of what goes wrong in practice is because when you have so many pucks on the ice, it inherently doesn't become game-like. You start too quickly because kids are excited and want to go. You start too quickly because the coach is impatient and doesn't want to have this flow to their practice feel choppy because there's 3 rebounds and it's starting to feel stagnant. But yet that's hockey. And I think if we had some teams that just had 1 puck on the ice for each of their stations and had to get that puck to move it to the next start, to start the next progression, it would already bake in some of those fundamentals we talked about. But coaches would have to get comfortable with practice looking sloppy because it's not going to be smooth. The whistle's not going to be on beat and sound like a rhythm. It's going to be messy. But I think that's really what learning is messy.
Yeah, we had Rob Gray on the podcast a little while ago, and Rob's a learning specialist, works with the Boston Red Sox. He's a former goalie himself, so it was fun to have him on. And one of the hardest things, you said it wonderfully, which is that good practice doesn't look like what we're used to seeing. And that's a really hard thing to wrap your head around, is when you have that, representative learning design, you're trying to, again, get close to a game while working on the things that, you might not see all the time in a game, right? Like half-wall integration situations. You might only get 3 of those in a game. So doing a scrimmage is not going to make you better at that because you might only, again, see 2 or 3 of them. So you might have to focus on that. But it's still going to look a lot different. It's going to look like coaches might be really hands-off. It might look like, players aren't, like you said, they're not smooth. They're maybe a little bit disorganized, but you need to design things appropriately. It's going to challenge people. It's going to force them to think differently. And I think, again, the mission that you've outlined and USA Hockey's outlined is actually it's about as on the nose with the best leading research that you can possibly read. So it is kind of inspiring, Jamie. It's making me reconsider my current patriotic status. Like, should I go back? Can I be welcomed back? I was there. I was there for 3 years. Am I welcome back?
We'll see, but that actually brings me up to like a good question. I think I'm going to ask this one selfishly, but I think it's beneficial for both parents, goalies, and goalie coaches that are listening that need to have that conversation with their coaches, especially when it's around trying to create a more friendly practice. And I've done something that I've dealt with, like talking to different organizations that I've been involved with. And I've said, like, hey, I would love, for me, it doesn't benefit me to come out and just push pucks and talk to the goalies while they're doing flow drills. Like, even if you give me 30 minutes to start a practice once a week, I can get way more done with that. And there's been pushback where it's like, well, that's not how we've done things. And it's a little bit easier in my position as a goalie coach, but if you're the parent of a goalie and you're trying to get any sort of opportunity you can to help your child to be the best that they can be, how does one kind of create that conversation, or at least get it started within the organization? I know this is kind of nuanced and difficult, but how would you set that up or recommend that for a parent?
Yeah, I'm going to steal this one from Tomas Magnuson, who I've had such a great time meeting over the last handful of years, who oversees Swedish goaltending development. He gave me a tip a few years ago when I met him, and I've been living by this ever since. If you want to make change, make the solution about the forwards and D, and just have it be an unintended benefit for your goaltenders. And that's exactly where I would come at it from this point of view. Skills training is important. We know that. And we know that most practice is more chaotic. It's more small-sided games, small area games. It's harder to teach some technique in those spaces. That's important. We do need that, but we can't live there 100% of the time. Now, I would come at it from this point of view. If our players, forwards and D, need some technique training, whether it's stick skills, edge work skills, etc., let's bake that into our practice. And then you just happen to be at the goalie side doing some goalie technique while the player coaches are working on player technique. That, to me, is a better solution for hockey in general. I don't like the idea that the goalie is anything different and special. I don't think goalie is unique and needs technique and everything else just to get to play and have fun. I think players equally need that, and I think that's where this goal gap is starting to happen, where goaltending numbers in the NHL right now are higher than we've seen since like the 80s. It's crazy how many goals are going in, but I think it's because the forwards and D have started to get skills coaches and work on some of these techniques like the goalies had been for the past 30, 40 years, and now they're starting to catch up to us. And now we have to move that pawn in the other direction to counterbalance this thing because we're losing ground here. But I think that would be my argument to my youth hockey clubs is, listen, Your forwards and D need this training. Can we do a skills day in the first 30 minutes of practice? We have 3 different sections of ice where we work on position-specific skills. You just happen to be at the other end with the goalies. But now you're not beating the goalie drum and knowing everybody that's not a goalie. You're there to develop hockey players. And in the back of your mind, you know that you're there for the goalies.
Yeah, something that, like, again, and that's, again, that's another fantastic answer. But something that we've talked a lot about from like a research lens and an applied sports science lens on this is that a good drill that works on skills that a forward and defender needs will represent what a goalie needs to work on, right? Like if you think a player doesn't need to work on corner walkouts, I have bad news for you. Like, a player does need to work on those. A defender needs to work on defending them, right? The hardest challenge, I think, in practice design, especially at a youth level, is the bandwidth that coaches have for the design of those types of drills, right? And I know, like, I'll give a shout out to Hockey Canada. They've created this resource, and I know USA Hockey is the same thing. These drill hub resources where coaches are able to go in it and look at stuff. I think there's still a gap there between, seeing a drill and then seeing what is feasible to put into a practice, right? So from a coach education side of things, I think that's something that I've always been curious about. And I know, again, at least in Canada, I know we hurt for coaches, and I know it's hard to get, a lot of the time we have parent coaches and volunteer coaches. So to then ask them and say, hey, I need you to design these really thoughtful drills. We're asking a lot of people, right? I don't have a solution to this, and I also don't have a question. I just know that it is just one, I think that is one of the biggest gaps. And I think there is an opportunity to bridge that. And again, I don't think it's as simple as here, do this drill, because that can work to some degree, but I think it's going to be continued education and support that might happen at the organization level rather than a national organization level, right?
Yeah, that's what makes this answer so challenging, is that we have had a problem, and maybe this is too dramatic of a connection, but have you guys seen the Quiet on Set documentary that just came out about Nickelodeon and youth?
I've just read about it, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. I've just read about it and seen kind of the information.
I just finished that the other day, and this is a gross overturn into youth sport. But really my takeaway was that we are professionalizing kids too soon.
Yeah.
Really mentally abusing them with the best of intentions of trying to make them adults as soon as possible. Because it's cool to be an adult. You get all these things that kids always want to be older than they actually are. Parents want their kids to be older, etc. But I couldn't stop thinking about youth sport the entire time I was watching this, as these young kids were in acting careers and being fired at young ages when they weren't mentally prepared to be fired, and it affected them the rest of their lives. And there was a lot of other things under the toe of all that was hopefully not going on in youth sport.
Right.
But really what I took away from it was that we're forcing kids to be professionally way too early. And then what led me to that in this conversation is that I think sometimes we are forcing our youth coaches to be professional coaches.
Yeah.
The reality is they're a youth hockey coach. They're an accountant by day. Their kid happens to play on the team and they want to be a part of their kids' lives, and this is quality time for them. The reality is, at some level, they won't have the time to develop a practice plan that's super detailed and has a really thoughtful approach to it. There are going to be areas and levels of hockey and youth sport where just going out there and having the best time of your life and making sure that for that 60 minutes between the glass is everybody's favorite hour of their entire day, and they can't wait to get back to the rink. To me, that is a world-class youth sport experience. Now, there are going to be varying levels as kids get older, and there are a lot of youth sport coaches right now that are making over $100,000 a year to be a youth sport coach. So that's where my patience is thinner. When you're getting paid a full salary, then in my opinion, you need to treat this like a full salaried position. And your practice design should be very detailed and thoughtful. Your communication to your players on why you're doing what you're doing should be very detailed and very thoughtful. Because that's the other area of this where I feel like sometimes we don't do a great job of explaining to the parents and kids why we're doing what we're doing. When we are hands off and letting them learn and letting them figure it out, that's great. But it shouldn't be a, hey, I got you moment. You just learned and you didn't know it. It should be communicated that, hey, I'm letting you figure this out because I'm not going to be in your ear when the game starts. I can't tell you where to go next. I can't script the play for you. So it's intentional that I'm not giving your kid information if the parent's frustrated that you didn't say anything all day. If you communicate that well, then I think that constraints-led approach can be really powerful. But if you don't communicate it well, it can look like you're being lazy, like you don't know what you're doing. it can feel like they didn't gain very much because it does take longer to learn in that approach, in my opinion. But if they understand that that's the process and that overall they're going to be better for it, and you can not maybe live in that space all the time, maybe you can have some more scripted drills out there to build their confidence and to show them that, hey, you are getting better at this. Do you remember when we did this 2 months ago and you could barely hit the net? Now you're hitting the net all the time, et cetera. You can build strategy into this approach. But I think for those professional coaches in youth sport, this should be a requirement. It should be a mandate that you get coaching education. You should be driven towards research to understand how to be better and to be more modern. But if you are in a more recreational state, make sure every single kid on your team plays hockey the next season. If you've got 20 for 20 retention, you won the Stanley Cup. Even if you lost every single game in your season, if you have full retention, you win. If you lost just one kid, reevaluate why. What did you do in the environment you created throughout that season that you could do differently to never lose a kid?
Yeah, again, so thank you again for just, this is great. Jamie, I feel like I'm in the best echo chamber of my life. I don't know about you, but this is...
You're just getting, yeah, but no, I wasn't involved in the podcast with Dr. Gray, but so far, for me, this is one of my top podcasts just because of the applied sports science and also the research aspect that we've been able to talk about and you've been able to bring in. Now, I have a few more questions. Now, Ben, I'll let you finish your thought because my questions are going to take us down a different road. So,
no, I was going to say, there's like, again, I think what Steve said here is a really important distinction. I just want to echo it again, is that it's really hard, I think, for parents and coaches to sometimes take a step back and realize what the goals of sport is, right? And before I get yelled at by the participation trophy people, I think it's really important to acknowledge that sport is inherently competitive and winning is fun, but your 11-year-old will not remember any of their games when they're 30. I can promise you, because I don't remember a single one, Jamie. I know you definitely blocked all those out. Right? Like and again, this is a quick story. I've said it before, but I once played on a team that went 2-50. I was 12 years old. We won 2 games. We lost 50. My parents asked me, wasn't that a terrible season? I said, I don't remember a single game from it. So it must not have been. That was, U13 AAA. The highest level I could have possibly played at that age. No one remembers, right? And Jamie, we always talk about this. What's that cutoff for when it starts moving from recreational? If you're playing AAA at U13 or 12 years old, you're in the 7th grade. Some of those players will go on to play junior. They'll go on to play college. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to play with a pro of any level of pro. Maybe if you're on an okay team. That's still recreational for those 7th graders for the most part. Even if it's the highest level they can play, right? So the goal should be to get better. And you've outlined, Steve, a number of really, really important steps that makes good seasons and good practices. But I think that is like a really key reminder is we can start professionalizing and taking it seriously when people are being paid, and we can then, you now have some expectations and some KPIs or key performance indicators for that work as a coach who's being paid for a job, right? That is where we can make difference. But let's also, let's not professionalize U9, recreational hockey too. So that's I just want to really echo that because I cannot emphasize this enough. And we say it all the time, Jamie, and now we have someone else saying it. So now.
You sparked an idea or a memory I have with this participation medal. So it was probably 3 years ago. I was running a turkey trot, and I was imagining in my head I would be as fast a runner as I was when I played. I had ran a long time, and I was just terrible. I barely got across the line in a 5K. I'm like, this is embarrassing. And they handed me a medal. And I'm like, I do not deserve this medal. I was the biggest plug out here today. Like, they should be like booing me as I cross this finish. And I grabbed my apple cider and my little donut, and I'm sitting on the stair by the finish line. And I'm kind of just reflecting on the run and how I'm out of shape and need to get my act together. And as I'm doing that, I'm watching people cross the line. And there was a lot of people that had crossed the line that were in a lot worse shape than I was, maybe hadn't ran in a long time. And they had tears in their eyes when they got this medal. They were so proud of themselves for crossing the line. And that was the moment it finally hit me. Because I was always against this participation medal idea. I thought, why on earth would you reinforce bad behavior? We need everybody to know you're a loser unless you win. That's how life works. But to watch these people celebrate finishing the race and be so proud of themselves for getting it done, coming from many different walks of life, maybe being older age, just having kids and getting back into athletics again for the first time in a long time, that finally sparked my mind on why it's so important to be inclusive, why it's so important for these people to feel inspired to get back and put those running shoes on again the next day. Now, yes, they didn't win the turkey trot, but if our goal is health overall and it's a 5K turkey trot, who cares? Why on earth would we not want to motivate people to continue to run, to stay healthy? And who knows how many of these people are going to get in elite shape, all of a sudden run a marathon, do amazing things in life that they never would have if they were booed when they crossed the line with me. And that really hit home for me working in the youth sports space. We worry so often about kids not being motivated if they get a pat on the back for just showing up. But yet so many kids don't continue to show up because they aren't told they belong. They aren't told they're doing a great job. We only pride the starting goalie. We only take pride in the kid who scores 3 goals a game. Everybody else, look at him. Don't you wish you could be him one day? And how many kids don't come back to the rink because they never feel like they belong? But yet, if we could make everyone feel like they belong in youth sport, which again, youth sport to me is no different than the turkey trot. It's not a big deal. Numbers show that we have no idea of predicting who's going to play in the NHL one day, no matter how many goals you score, no matter how many pucks you stop. So our job in youth sport is to make sure everybody belongs, everybody feels great, so they stay in the sport long enough to then potentially become that goalie that we see on TV that we're all so proud of. And so again, totally wrap my head around that participation, but to see those people really reminded me of why that's so important. And I'm hopeful that some listeners can feel that way as well moving forward.
Yeah, and again, like that's, and this could kind of go back and forth. And Jamie, I'm trying to be mindful of Steve's time too, and our time. But like again, and you know, we've talked about my colleague Joe Baker before all the time, and the reality is it's dishonest to say that you can work really hard and you'll make it. That's a lie, right? Like I like to think I worked really hard. I was pretty far away. But then we look on the flip side of it, like again, if hockey wasn't or couldn't be even an inclusive space, like Jamie, you started goalie at 12. You were ancient relative to what kids are doing now, right? If there wasn't that space, you might not have had it either, right? Yeah. Now, again, that's I know who you played for in youth hockey, so I know the coaching experience that you had. But that's a separate issue. Jamie and I played for the same coach at different times in our life. So, but again, like, yeah, Steve, I do think that's wonderful. Like Jamie and I have said this, our goals as goalie coaches in a private setting, and I tell every parent this, and Jamie tells every parent this, our goal is that your kid plays when they're in their 20s. I don't care if it's Saturday night at their best friend's scrimmage, or if it's Saturday night in front of a sold out stadium, right? I want them to still love the sport because the odds aren't in their favor. No matter how much money you spend with Jamie, it's like the odds aren't in their favor, and that's okay. They could still be the one that makes it. Just acknowledge that, right?
Yeah, I think that's important. Like that's like Ben and I talked about it, and he mentioned like for me, oftentimes when parents take their 11 and 12-year-olds and they're like, "What's your goal? Or where do you see my kid?" I'm like, "Well, I can't tell you now. I can give you a better insight when they're 16, 17. But my goal for them is like if I can get as many of my athletes to college, whether that's Division I down to ACHA club, if I can get them to there where they can, get an education and be able to continue to play at a competitive level with their friends and have that team experience, that college experience that all three of us had, that's my goal. And then after that's their goal in terms of the high level performance. And then with some, it's going to be like Ben said, just be able to strap on the pads and play. I mean, I don't strap on the pads and play because I was so burnt out that I have no desire to ever do that again. And that sometimes I think about how much that sucks because I loved being a goalie more than anything in the whole world. Now I love coaching more than anything in the whole world, so that's great. But in the performance side, it's like my goal is not to get every kid to the NHL. My goal is to get them better every day and to take steps further and hopefully get them to college. And then from there, yeah, like the best goalies will be able, my focus will be like, time to get you to go pro. But for some, it's like, let's be the best Ottawa goalie that you can be. And so I have one last question for you because we could talk all day and hopefully we can get you back on for round 2 because I have a whole bunch of other questions, especially when it comes into like more specific goalie stuff. But in terms of USA Hockey and what they offer, I hear a lot through my Instagram DMs where I get kids in places you mentioned like Wyoming and Arkansas and Kansas where they don't have a goalie coach every 5 feet like Ben and I had when we grew up. So what does USA Hockey have resources or things that either they can do or the parents can do or the head coach of their team who knows nothing about goaltending? what they can access to at least get some sort of coaching, whether that's in person or online or video format?
Yeah. And so I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking. I'd love for you and Jamie or Ben to sit on and watch one of our bronze courses. We have bronze, silver, and gold, which mimic our 1-5 track that's goalie specific. The bronze is really tailored towards just hockey coaching in general. It doesn't matter what your experience is in hockey. It doesn't matter what your experience is in goaltending. Our goal is that when you leave that 2-day Zoom course, you know enough about the fundamentals of the position, the equipment, how to put it on properly, really basic drill design, more about how to choose the right drill instead of designing the right drill. And then trying just to build a passion for age-appropriate training. So understanding what's appropriate for an 8U goalie versus a 16U goalie and knowing it's okay for both. It doesn't mean that you're treating them like a baby if you treat them like a 10U, and it doesn't mean that you're, holding the 16U back if you're not treating them like an NHL goalie, and really trying to drive that relationship that doing what's right for kids is right. And that's really hard sometimes for us to do because we want so badly for them, again, to make it higher. And we think we have to train them like that now if we're going to ever do that. And so that was what I would encourage anybody to take. We initially had that assistant coaching education track where you had to be a level 1 to start. That was the only prerequisite. But now what we started doing is we've invited goalie parents to attend as well. And it's been really powerful to see because what we always had, we'd give all this information and the coaches say, well, if the goalie parents only knew this, we could actually make this happen. So then we started doing some parent-only meetings and showing them the same exact content, but just from the perspective of a goalie parent. And they say, well, if our coaches only knew this, then we could actually make positive change. And so we kind of called both parties bluffs. And we said, listen, we'll come in, we'll work with your entire association, and then we're going to invite all your goalie parents to it as well. So the coaches and the goalie parents are all in the same Zoom call, all hearing the same recommendations. And then there's some great breakout rooms where you get to discuss your thoughts, because the one thing we can't do is we can't be everywhere. So I have no idea what your local area looks like. These are recommendations, but maybe we recommend that your goalie should split periods at the halfway point of every period at 10U. Maybe you only have one goalie on your team. Really hard to split a period if you're the only goalie. So some of our recommendations don't make sense for everyone. And that's where we have some great discussion on, okay, what are the foundations to that decision? What can we do with what you have to give the best experience possible? And so for anybody listening, look at our coaching education website. You'll see bronze, silver, and gold. Our bronze is the most entry level. It's only 2 days on Zoom. And then there's a homework assignment in between for the coaches, not so much for the parents. Our silver is a year-long course, but it is open to anybody to register for. It's three-hour Zoom calls, and then you meet in person in conjunction with an NHL team. We'll go to the game. We'll have the goalie coach come and meet with us, and we'll do some on-ice training, kind of reinforcing what we talked about on Zoom. And then our gold course is the most exclusive. It is application only. This year, we had 10 people out of about 100 that applied that got in, and you have a full year-long project on growing the game. And so actually in about 2 weeks, all of those students will be defending their thesis in a lot of ways on this project, ranging from, net integration at different age groups to try goalie for free events and how to make those as fun as possible to practice design. We have someone who's an economist by trade who was really inspired by team practice. And so he actually measured every single shot that was taken throughout his season in practice and in games. And what his project is on is the diversity of what games in youth hockey look like versus what practice in youth hockey looks like. And he's going to have some really powerful data to show, again, what we've already talked about, that our practices don't look like our games, and we yet expect our games to look like what we hope when we're not training for that. So those are our 3 elements that we really teach currently. In addition to that, we do have some webinars that people can watch. If you go to our YouTube channel, that we've had Scott Clemenson speak about some things from the Devils' perspective. We had Jim Craig and Matty Rooney and Steve Cash, some of our national team legends, talking about their career and their experiences. So we've had some pretty cool keynote speakers that have met and talked about goaltending that could also be valuable for some of the parents out there.
I think that's the perfect way to end it, Jamie. I don't even think we need to have an outro.
I think that was really good. Steve, thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot, and I hopefully those listening and watching find it as valuable as Ben and I did. Do you have any last things that you want to add? You talked about the different bronze, silver, gold. For anyone that needs anything goaltending wise, reach out, find you on the USA Hockey website.
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, if you need to get a hold of me, steve.thompson@usahockey.org, please email me. Would love to talk goalie. That's why I'm in this position, is because I enjoy it so much. Two, if anybody lives in the Minneapolis area, on June 1st, we will have our National Goaltending Symposium trade show. We're bringing in all of the goalie gear manufacturers, anything training related. Sense Arena is going to be there. There's some other products that do some on-ice training. And then we're also going to have some really cool keynote speakers that are going to there just to celebrate the position. And so anybody that loves goaltending, come on in, see some cool gear, hear from some cool speakers, and celebrate that. And the last thing I want to say to the group, anybody listening, is that please do everything in your power to celebrate this awesome position we're in. One of the things we're really trying to work on is rebranding the position. Forever, it's been seen as the kid that can't skate, or the kid that's kind of quirky and wants to be off in their own world, or the kid that's out of shape, whatever the stigma's been. But for those that love it like we do, we know the leadership that comes with this position. We know that goalies go on to be doctors and get their PhD, to become lawyers, to become medical doctors. There's so many great things that the pressure of the position builds. And those that assume that pressure and are excited about it become amazing people away from the rink. And I hope that moving forward, those are the messages that we send when we think about why you should be a goalie one day. And it's not that you're the quirky weirdo. And I think the more we reinforce that by talking about it, it continues to be a reality. But we're not wearing no mask any longer, or horsehair pads that the puck truly hurts. You don't need to be crazy to play. Maybe you did back in the day because you were getting stitches when you did your job well, but that's no longer the case. I really think goaltending is the safest position in hockey. And so you're probably the smartest player on the ice if you're choosing to play goalie anymore, but that's never talked about. So I just really hope that everybody listening, please join this mission with us and sharing that message when you talk about how great our position is, and we can maybe remove that old stigma that we've been dealing with for the history of the game.
Absolutely. Steve, thank you so much. For everyone listening, thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to everyone in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.